Nobody's asking you to stop. Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show, and it's an honor to be joined here by a legendary drummer, Chris Park. Welcome, my man.
Thanks, Jake.
You know, I wanted to ask you, you're a painter. You love to paint. Do you see colors when you play music?
I do.
You talk to the audience about that. Could be a bit of an abstraction, but a lot of musicians say they see colors.
I see colors. I also see compositions. I see the picture plane. I see perspective. I see things in the foreground. I see things peripherally going into the distance. Perspective and textures I see.
How does that work as it relates to its solo we just saw? I mean, your eyes were closed, but I mean, I think we talked before about the idea, like maybe it was with somebody else, where they say, this is going to be green here, and this is going to be opaque here, and this is going to be gray here. I mean, what can you break that down for people that are just trying to keep time?
Yeah, textures.
Please feel free to demonstrate it if that makes it easier. Like a green into an opaque into a whatever you want.
Stuff is very green to me. Bold, bold dark lines, Prussian blue or black.
Yep.
Mondrian or charcoal drawings or something. Get little textures, which might be pigment, but very diluted things. Like where you see a line, but the line has been erased, or there's tracks leading to it, or skid marks into it. Second line.
People are loving it. I mean, when you were an aspiring painter and artist, at what school in Manhattan did you go to?
School of Visual Arts.
I mean, you were like, this needs a little more teal or blue, but was there ever a point where you said, I'm gonna walk away from music, or was the calling just too strong? Was there ever a point where there was sort of this breaking point, and you just said, I just have too much of a calling, I need to get it out of my system?
Music?
Yeah.
No, never music. and never painting. I can't get it out of my system either.
Yeah, you were just drawing pictures of Steve Gadd the other day.
That's right.
But a lot of the cats are. I mean, can you explain this? Is it synesthesia in the sense where you might feel something as opposed when it's multi-sensory? Is that something you were born with?
I guess so. I think so. To me, it's hand-eye coordination. It's what your eyes see, your hands can do, and your feet can do. And to me, putting a pencil on the page is very much like putting a stick on the drums. The cliche analogies are, stretching a head, stretching a canvas, stretching a head on a drum is very similar action, especially when you had calfskin heads. But the idea of organizing your palette, laying out the colors, organizing your palette, laying out the colors, same stuff, all the different brushes, all the different things you play with, up to these, up to...
What do you got there?
These are stuff sticks.
Look at that.
Yeah, they've been used. They double as clave, but great for big overdubs in the old age, and the tom-tom overdubs. But all kinds of stuff. There's always something new to play with. These are called dem sticks, which are the brushes, but a more percussive version of brushes. There's all kinds of things. I mean, and they're all part of your palette. This guy, Ed Bettinelli, made these, that go on one finger. They can play with having shakers attached. So, and the same thing with painting. I'm always looking for a new pastel or a new way to put color on paper. It's not just canvas and oil paint. There's acrylics, there's pastels, there's watercolors. I love watercolors, because they're so immediate and fluid and less serious than oil paints in terms of being able to go back into it all the time. Once watercolor dries, that's kind of it. Oil paint you can keep going back into with turpentine and linseed oil.
This is what I want the audience to understand. When you were up in Woodstock and Butter was in the crowd with that Eskimo hat, okay? Now, he saw you, just for the record, we're talking to a drummer here, you played in gospel settings. He saw you play in gospel settings. He saw you play in jazz settings. He saw you play in blues settings, R&B settings.
Yep.
Are there discernible differences in the grooves? Could you demonstrate the different grooves that Butter was seeing that then he eventually said, I want this cat in my Better Days band? You can introduce each groove and the subtleties of it.
Well, the gospel thing with four singers, and there was an R&B element to it, but certainly at some point it got into the back of the church and people clapping their hands. He heard me in jazz settings where I'm playing something. Folk, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Ah.
Country stuff where it's one brush and one stick. Old country, not today's Nashville country.
Nash Vegas country, yeah.
Or Hank Williams. Hear that lonesome whistle blow. What else should we say? Jazz?
I mean, boogaloo or...
country, like what they would call like new age, very light with acoustic guitars. You heard me doing, upright bass. Get in the way of the singers. Oh, we're going to the chorus. Probably not have a bass drum at all, probably just hi-hat and snare drum.
Butter basically said, at some point he called you up and said, I saw you, and he told you right off the bat he saw you in all these settings?
No, but that came out once we were on the road and hanging out and talking together, and he would mention these groups. I said, oh my God, you were there?
Right.
And then it came back to me, there was this guy with the Eskimo fur hat in the background sometimes, look up, there's that same guy, never realizing it was him. But in a jazz setting, in a gospel setting, a blues setting, a country setting, bluegrass, whatever there was in Woodstock, whatever kind of music was being played, and there was a lot of different stuff.
Chris Parker here, we're joined here, such a delight here to be at, what's the name of this joint where we're at right now?
This is the Music Building.
The Music Building, 584 8th Avenue.
8th Avenue, yep.
And so Jimmy Cobb I was transcribing my interview with Cobb, and he said that, he was talking about the important thing in a rhythm section is that well, let me ask you, what is the intangible part that makes a rhythm section groove? Jimmy was talking being able to as a drummer to be playing a little bit on top.
Huh.
Yeah, and I wanted you to talk a little bit about what you thought made a compelling rhythm section, and who was a bass player that you enjoyed, that you really locked in with, no matter where they put the beat.
Well, Gordon, is...
Gordon Edwards.
Yeah, Gordon Edwards was way up there. Bob Babbitt, I loved playing with. Will, I loved playing with, of course. He was always first choice for the bands that I put together, whether it was...
Just take Babbitt. Babbitt really was one of the pioneers of electric bass.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first session you were on with him?
Yeah, some jingle or something. And he never mentioned, and I never put it together because they didn't have credits on Motown Records, that he had all this. I knew he was from Detroit, but I never put it together that he was the guy on all these Motown records.
Well, wait, let's back up because that's a little bit mind-blowing. He was pre-Jamerson on the Motown label?
No, same
era.
Or slightly after. But he played on a ton of Motown stuff, Four Tops and Temptation and... you would have to look at Standing in the Shadows of Love, the Motown movie. It's got all his credits listed. But he was a great bass player, and he always ended each session, well, good to see you. I got to go home and play with the baby's mother. Which I would always say, what?
No, he wanted quality time with his wife.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what he wanted. He didn't want the baby to get all the quality.
The way he said it was always...
Yeah, but I was talking to my friends about that hierarchical structure has been flipped upside down now in modern times. But
He was great to play with. Will was great to play with. There's a guy I played with on a couple of Lou Rawls albums, Tinker Barfield, who played in Luther
Tinker Barfield.
Yeah, he played with Luther Vandross for many years. So many great bass players. The guy.
What about John Kahn?
John Kahn was great to play with. Yeah, and Billy Rich, who's still with Taj Mahal after all these years. He was great to play with, and the Butterfield Band. Tony Garnier with Bob Dylan, and Kenny Aronson before Tony Garnier were really fun guys to play with. Walter Becker, played bass on the Kamakuriad album that I played on with Donald Fagen. It was Walter playing bass. He was really a great bass player as well as a brilliant guitar player. Francisco Centeno was a great. We played on a lot of Ashford and Simpson hits together. He was great. Is great. He's still around. To me, the important thing in the rhythm section is chemistry. It's almost has less to do with playing than how you guys get along personally. Because you're not playing 24/7, but if you get along on a personal level, that sort of gives you a platform to take off from. Once you start playing music together, your camaraderie and how you get along on a personal level enhances that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point that you're making there, because what Jimmy said at the end was that if you're fighting each other, it's going to be a drag. So personally, if you can lock in on a personal level,
yeah,
you're going to be able to feel each other better on the bandstand.
Like I played some gigs with Milt Hinton when he was still around.
Wow.
We did me, Bob James, and Milt Hinton did some gigs at a place that's long gone. But he was such a wonderful man, and he talked about photography, and I talked about painting, and then we actually got up and played together, and it was just magical. He was great. Ron Carter is a great guy to play with, and great sense of humor.
In his playing.
In his personal and in his playing. I run into him on the street sometimes, and he says, "Hey, Chris, I got a gig for you. There's no drums."
Let me ask you about playing with Bob Dylan, because Buzzy Featon said that when he was in the studio, and this is probably before you connected with Bob, but basically Bob would just start playing the tune. There were not chord charts or any, along those lines. He just would pick up the guitar and start singing, and he'd let the people that he brought into the session work it out. When did you connect with Bob, and how did that work with you on drums?
With me, it worked great on drums with him. We rehearsed for a while. I never actually made an actual record with him. There's plenty of bootlegs out there with me playing. I was with him from '88 to '92, and we rehearsed for a couple of weeks before we went on the first tour.
What would a rehearsal? What was the R word like with? Because like someone like Con and Garcia, they hated the R word. They didn't want. I'm sure Merle was the same way. They did not want to rehearse. They thought it was a bad word. So what did rehearsal look like for Bob?
We would go over tunes. Sometimes his tune, sometimes somebody else's tune that he felt like playing, like a Hank Williams tune or a Johnny Cash tune, or one day we rehearsed God Only Knows, Brian Wilson Beach Boy tune, which is a really not an easy tune.
No.
It's got 5/4 bar in there and stuff. But he wanted to get it. He wanted to sing it. And we did his material. This was in preparation for the first tour, so he did, his hits. Masters of War, Like a Rolling Stone, and Times They Are Changing.
Did he do any of the Born Again stuff or off the Saved album?
Gotta Serve Somebody, yeah, we did that. One More Cup of Coffee. We did a lot of different tunes. We probably rehearsed 300 tunes. And some of them made the set list. Some of them didn't make the first couple of concerts, but then were added in later on as he felt like doing them, if it was appropriate to the venue. Like we did a really mean Masters of War when we played West Point Academy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I guess more the intangibles. What Buzzy was saying was that Bob could not verbally express it. I mean, it was more just feeling.
Yeah.
And can you just talk about that sense, that the feel, as opposed to dictating through words?
Definitely less verbal communication, but he stands in front of the band, and I was usually directly behind him. I watched his body language almost as much as, more than anything he actually said. Play this, could you play that? He never asked me to play a certain thing. How about brushes on this or something? He never said anything like that. He definitely gave me carte blanche about what I wanted to play or how I wanted to play it. You know, like Knocking on Heaven's Door one night had been treated as a kind of an acoustic thing, acoustic guitars and him playing harmonica and typical thing. But one night it occurred to me, you know, this would be really great with drums. So I came out and entered with a, you know, and he loved it. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. And he loved it. You know, I got a big smile. So that was how it went for the next couple of concerts at least. But he never liked things to be predictable. You know, he's total artist.
Never played the same song once.
He wanted things to be different. And he was constantly exploring his own material, trying to get, you know, more mileage out of it, more ideas, more another road in. You know, I had a painting teacher who said, you know, leave tracks. Always leave tracks where you're going, and he would try to make new tracks into the same material, whether it was Times They Are Changin', or It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, or Boots of Spanish Leather, or you know, any tune that you hear, you know the recorded version, and that's the version you're used to hearing. He wanted to do new things with it, constantly exploring or adding new verses. You know, I heard a lot of verses on tunes that you never heard on the record.
Really?
Yeah, he wrote new poetry to go with the song.
Did you know, we were talking about Russ Kunkel earlier in the section. Who were some of the pioneer songwriters that you worked with on the East Coast? I mean, those cats were working with guys like, before they were famous, Jackson Browne and James Taylor. I mean, Russ got his break on Sweet Baby James album because of Peter Asher. Who were some of the songwriters? Dylan was, like, you were on tour with him in 88, what do you say, 88 to 92.
Yeah.
But back in the late 60s, early 70s, who stood out for you as a great singer-songwriter that you backed up?
I worked with Don Covey.
Really? How did that transpire?
I think through Gordon. I think Gordon said
Gordon Edwards. Yeah. We're referring to him as a first name, but the great bass player.
Gordon Edwards, and that was the standing band. Gordon, myself, Cornell Dupree, and Richard T. was a section, like an R&B section that did a lot of different things. We worked with Don Covey, the band called GQ. Ashford and Simpson was not Cornell and Gordon, but that was Francisco and I, and Richard and Ray Chu. There were a couple of different rhythm sections. Ashford and Simpson are great songwriters, you know, and Valerie continues to be a great songwriter. She's, you know, somebody who's way up there on my list of artists, you know, who sing and play and write.
It's a relentless pursuit of what's the word that I'm looking for? When you talk about Dylan, there's a searching quality there, or even with Covey and those cats. I mean, it's always just sort of what is that intangible quality about their desire for finding new ground?
Desire. Need to discover, you know, the constant curiosity about how can you take these changes and put them in a different form with some different lyrics and make it mean something else to different people, I guess. Very similar to artistic exploration. You know, all right, I've got watercolors and oil paints and pencils and paper, you know, what am I going to do with it? You know, and what inspires you, what challenges you. A pursuit of, it's not perfection, but a pursuit of veracity. You know, you want to find the truth and beauty in something, the truth and beauty in drumming or piano playing or songwriting. Bob is such a great poet. You know, when you read the lyrics, I have his all the lyrics, that book. You know, the poetry is really beautiful. Valerie Simpson too. Beautiful.
Yeah, that's a name I didn't know you actually worked with her.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, that's really, a lot of cats may not be aware. Parker got his start in the burlesque houses in Stratford, Connecticut. What part of Connecticut was that in?
Brookfield, Connecticut.
Brookfield, Connecticut. So I wanted you to talk about, because you walk into a strip club today. I haven't in a long time, but it's basically house music.
Right.
There's really no space in the music, and they're swinging around on a pole.
Right.
Can you talk about what was expected of you from the mob cat that was running the place?
Nino.
And then ultimately, the kind of grooves that you were playing for the dancers.
Well, different dancers wanted a different thing. Some wanted a cha-cha, Latin-y. Some the tradition. Also dance to, straight ahead, the rock of the day. Where Earl Palmer had already started straightening out the eighth notes from the swung eighth notes.
But the demands were, you had to, it wasn't, you weren't playing to an audience. You were.
Yeah, there was an audience, and they were drinking, and there was tenor and drums, at least, most of the time. Maybe sometimes organ, maybe sometimes a bass player. So there were certain rock tunes that we played before the Beatles. So the rock was... Oh, we had one vocalist, Claire Lane, who was the sister of Frankie Lane, who did Ghost Riders in the Sky.
But what I'm saying is, putting her aside, the idea there, most people talk about supporting a singer as a drummer, but here you're supporting a dancer.
Yeah.
Is there a difference?
Absolutely. The dancer wants, heavy on the rhythm and stuff that she can bump to, and stuff that's a relentless groove, the same is true today, but reggaeton, but a lot of four-on-the-floor bass drum and stuff. Back then, that wasn't a popular dance. All disco and all that stuff hadn't happened. So the crossover between Latin dancing, ballroom dancing, swing dancing, Lindy hopping, all that stuff was kind of crossed in there. So
yeah, this is, absolutely fascinating. I'm just curious about. I looked at one of your most recent albums, and there's like 3 tunes that were composed by Arif Mardin.
Right.
Can you talk about your relationship with Arif and why you such adherence to those tunes?
Well, Joe Mardin, his son, produced the album, and when we were talking about material for the album, I had a bunch of original stuff, and he wondered if I would be interested in recording Arif's songs, and I had loved Arif's solo albums, one called Glass Onion and one called Journey.
Wow, I have Journey. I still haven't been able to get my ear fully. What did you like about those albums?
His arrangements, and his orchestrations, the players that he assembled were great. But I had fallen in love with him just as a name on an album jacket, with Son of a Preacher Man, Dusty Springfield, and before that, Rainy Night in Georgia was the first Brooke Benton song that I heard, and it has this little harmonica thing in it, and just has, we were talking about, you know, the confluence of painting and music, you know, and this was, that arrangement and that record painted this picture of a rainy night in Georgia, and the vocal and all the instrumentation really conjured that, you know, when you heard it on the radio. So that was the first time I took notice of that name, but then he produced all kinds of people for Atlantic.
Well, I mean, you know, Spinoza was in there when Dr. John was there with Arif.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk to you about double drums specifically. When was the first time? When was the first time that you saw somebody doing double drums? Was it Buddy Rich? Was it? I mean, and what was the purpose of double drums at that time? Could you break that down a little bit? I'm talking before psychedelic rock and you know, Don Ellis and the Allman Brothers and those cats.
Well, long before that, the way I grew up with my younger brothers, we all played drums. So there was a period growing up where there were 4 or 5 sets of drums in the house. Everybody had a set.
Wow.
My father played drums. When he wasn't painting, he was playing drums. And my mother played piano. But we would constantly be jamming, you know, and trying to cut each other. And there was a lot of sibling rivalry and competition.
Was it chops driven or more like how would you cut somebody? I mean, you know, it was
chops driven and that's volume, sheer volume, but also the relentless groove. You know, if you could get something going that they couldn't keep up with what they were doing and had to join your thing and get on board your train, that was when you could get everybody on your side and your groove. That was kind of the winning combination. My mother is playing piano, and one of my fondest memories, she said, "Can somebody? What about brushes?"
Brushes. Could you play some brushes and just demonstrate that for the audience and how tasteful they can be? I can't imagine 5 drum sets in the house.
Oh, it was so loud. It was so loud. It could get loud. So when I saw Steve
Gadd.
Yeah, he was using a pair of brushes in each hand.
2 in each hand.
Yeah. So and I haven't mastered it. Steve and I agree. You know, it's more fun to play brushes than anything else.
Why do you guys say that? I think that's really important.
For one thing, it keeps the dynamic of the band down at a certain level. And if you're playing with acoustic piano and acoustic bass, it's the right level for the drums to be at. You know, they shouldn't be so loud that you're wiping out the piano or the acoustic bass.
say the dynamics going back to the burlesque houses and places like that. I mean, not everything was mic'd. You couldn't hear everything. I mean, where did you learn dynamics the most, in your opinion? As far as, like, Steve brings up a good point. Yeah. You can control the dynamics. Not everything's turned up to 10 and stays at 10. You can bring that down and modulate it. Where did you get the most bandstand? Was it at the burlesque houses?
Yeah, because sometimes it was just tenor and drum.
That to me is awesome. I mean, that's a lost art.
That's bare bones.
That's bare bones. But you don't have, so you have no bass. You have no bass partner, no rhythm mate.
No, and you learn, about the orchestrating the drum set, how to orchestrate the sound of the drum set to make them blend with the saxophone. Even when there was bass, you don't want to detract from the dancing, or if there was a singer, detract from that. The club wasn't gigantic. It wasn't a giant arena. There were no mics on the instruments, so everybody was balancing themselves on stage to sound good out front, and sometimes Nino or somebody else would say, "Hey, take it easy, fellas, take it easy."
But you weren't in trouble. He wasn't glaring at you, or
no, But he could tell when people are leaning in, trying to hear each other, the band is too loud. You want people to have a good time. You're there for the audience. You're there to entertain. You're there to back up the dancers. You're there to make it a comfortable environment. And people definitely, the volume level, when people have had a couple of drinks, the volume level goes up because everybody wants to be heard. But they shouldn't be competing against the band. Maybe they're competing against themselves, among hearing themselves at a table of 4 or 5 people. So that's when I really learned it, and then playing in bigger bands, playing in the high school band, junior high band, learning that with 5 horns, 5 saxes, 4 trombones, 4 trumpets, there's a certain amount of dynamic range that you have to be aware of to make the music overall have that dynamic range, to accent the horn parts, fills into the figures, the head of the tune, the solo section. It's all got to be exaggerated dynamics to make it work as a unit, to make the whole band work as a unit.
Exaggerated dynamics as opposed to just genuine dynamics? So it was
exaggerated dynamics, in the R&B thing too, with stuff. There was always a point where we've been wailing and grooving and you got to bring it down, to nothing. The groove doesn't stop, but
I dig, man. But you have to have big ears for that. I mean, you have to really listen to be able to hear it. You got to hear it when you got to bring it down, right?
Yeah. Solo sections, where the soloist is going to bring it down himself, and you got to stay underneath him. Richard T was playing acoustic piano, so
he played good organ too, didn't he?
He played great organ.
Great organ. I think Rainey told me that. Badass organ player.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to give away the genre, but I asked Ron Tutt, and even Tutt was humbled by a specific genre of music. And we went through the whole thing with Butter before. You make it seem effortless. You're pretty humble, Cat. But was there a genre of music that humbled you?
Fusion.
Yeah, but I don't even like that word, man. I mean, the late Phil Wood said that the first fusion music was Sean Opozo and Dizzy Gillespie.
Yeah,
right.
That's true. Yeah.
But what about fusion specifically was challenging? And what do you mean by fusion?
By nature, it goes against my prime purpose is to groove and to make people dance or make people groove so hard that they can't get the drink to their lips. That's to me is
it's falling on their shirt or on their
right. Wow, this band is grooving so hard. And if it's in 5, and then it goes into 9, and then it goes back to 5, and then into 7 or something like this, there's never a moment. It's amazing what you can do, and amazing to solo over that, and it's exciting musically, but nobody can relax into it, you know, that I've seen. I mean, 5/4s, it can be a funky time signature. 7 can be pretty funky. To me, I mean, there's Greek music in 9 that's you can dance to, definitely, but it stays in 9. You know, it doesn't go from 9 to 14 to 11.
Right.
So
you can't groove. So you can't groove into it. You can't ease into it. You can't feel the groove.
That I've seen. I mean, I'm sure there's an exception somewhere. You know, the people. I mean, Indian music, like Steve Smith demonstrates. He's learned, you know, all this Indian music, and it's groovy, but it's all these syllables, and it's very groovy. I couldn't personally dance to it, but I'm sure there are Indian people who hear that and say, "This is dance music. Let's get up." And
you talking about the polyrhythm, like the music that would be played traditionally on like tablas and things like that?
And Steve Smith has adapted that to drum set. It's
Wow.
amazing.
Wow.
I've seen a couple of his clinics. It's amazing. And he plays with Indian guys, you know, and they definitely groove. I couldn't dance to it.
So when do you remember like being humbled? Was there a definitive session or something where you were like, man, I can't dance to this?
Well,
without mentioning names, or I mean, is there? I mean, because I mean, fusion is such a popular term, but like I said, it goes back to the mid '40s.
Yeah. I'm humbled anytime I play with somebody. I'm humbled that they can play as good as they can play, and that I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to play with them. Probably the time that really made the biggest impressions on me was Randy Brecker, and when he had written all this new music, and we were rehearsing at Don Gromnick's apartment, and it was all written out, and I was struggling to read it.
Wow.
Because there were odd bars, and it was really new music. You know, this is early 70s with Mike and Randy and Sanborn and Will on bass and me and Steve.
Sounds like the
Kahn.
Dreams band.
It was after Dreams.
It was after Dreams.
Yeah.
Steve Kahn was on guitar.
Yep, and Buzzy Featon too.
Buzzy was in that band.
Yeah.
So how did you work it?
Time.
I think this is important because a lot of my one of the L's of my show is life, and it's about overcoming adversity. So I mean, it's beyond woodshedding. How did you get comfortable with? I mean, these guys are all great, but how did you get comfortable with the Gromnick, Brecker grooves?
I really went to work. It was woodshedding, and it was taking any piece of music and reading it. And I started studying piano, and I started practicing 8-9 hours a day, practicing drum music and practicing reading. You know, just reading per se. I had played trumpet all through school, but always played drums in the bands and stuff. But never, you know, had to learn really hard drum music. But Randy had everything written out, and the tunes were tough. You know, there were some really tough tunes. Not only some skunk funk, that's the most popular one or the most well-known one, but Squids and Creature of Many Faces, Creature, I think that's the title.
Right.
He had written all this new music that was really adventurous and really challenging for me. I think it was challenging for everybody. But the band got there, you know, on their first album, and then back to back, the second album, there's a lot of tough music on there that represents, you know, hours and hours of me practicing, studying. I had a number of great piano teachers that I studied with, Adolph Sandoli and Maria Sisek and Andy Laverne, and I really worked on learning piano and learning harmony and like never before. You know, Randy was
He's still doing it. I mean,
I know he's still doing it.
What about Tut's dilemma was when it wasn't a dilemma, but it was just humbling. Was reggae? Do you remember hearing
sure.
what was some of the early reggae that you heard that was sort of, because that changed up the rhythm sections for rock. It was very, very important for rock music at that time.
I listened to the Wailers and I listened to Jimmy Cliff, and I liked that. I gravitated towards that music, and Stuff did a tour with a singer named Margie Joseph.
Oh my gosh.
In the early 70s, where it was Stuff backing up Margie Joseph and another band from Philly, I think, Blue Magic, and all these reggae bands, Burning Spear, and a relatively new band at the time called Third World. So we were all on tour together for a couple of weeks, and I watched these guys intently every night, you know, with...
What were you specifically? I mean, what were you specifically looking at and
how the drummers, how the whole rhythm section approached time. You know, it was so laid back and so, you know. Their whole
but that might have been a more natural groove fit for you than fusion.
Oh yeah,
because it was lilting and it was danceable and you could feel
it had dancing to it. All you had to do is shift your weight from side to side, you know, and you were dancing. So,
you know, I really want you to talk to cats out there about. It was a legendary story. I don't know if there's another one you have, but the one about getting sick at the Howard Johnson, because to me it's like this is spirit. This is where the spirit comes in, because you did not, in your right mind, you probably should have been in bed in the hospital, and so just as we wrap here, I just would love you to talk about that story.
I went to New Orleans to work with this artist Randall Bramblett, and Alan Toussaint was on the record. We recorded at Sea Saint Studios, Alan's studio, and he had a couple of songs that were New Orleans flavored. It was great. There was one song called King Grand. I can't remember it, but it was great experience meeting Alan Toussaint, who I had, you know, already learned about from Lee Dorsey records, and he was legendary and amazing. Talk about an amazing songwriter.
I'll Take a Melody.
Yeah, man.
Unreal, man.
He wrote a lot of great songs. We do one with Akiko called "With You in Mind." That's a little obscure. I had never heard that one before, but Akiko found it.
And just for the record, Akiko's in your trio, right?
No. Akiko is Akiko Yano, who we go to Japan. Will and I go to Japan with her. We've been going. This year will be the 10th year.
Wow, Will Lee, man, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So but the Toussaint. So you gig with Toussaint, but then you got.
We were staying at a Howard Johnson's and sharing a room, and the guy I was sharing a room with was really sick. He might have had pneumonia himself, and I got it. We were sharing the room, and by the time I got back to New York, I went to the doctor and he said, "Well, you really, you shouldn't be doing anything but staying in bed. We should put you in the hospital. You got pneumonia." And I couldn't. I didn't want to miss the gig. I didn't want to miss the gig with Gordon and Richard and Cornell and Steve and Eric.
And that night you
got off the plane, went right to the gig, and it just felt like death. Death warmed over. But I was determined to play. I was not going to miss this gig. Determined to play, what was I gonna do? You know, just lay down. So anyway, the point of the story is that I was playing from instinct, just playing from instinct. I wasn't thinking about anything except when is this gig going to be over and I can go to bed. But right now, the important thing is the music, concentrating on the music and just playing it from the heart and playing it from instinct. No mental gymnastics, no like thinking about who's in the audience, no thinking about, you know, what will I play for my solo. How can I, you know, the conceptual stuff, you know, how can I make this song better? I just play from instinct. I know I just got to do what's necessary. And that was a night after the set, more than ever before. People came up, man, you were playing your ass off, man. I couldn't believe what you played, all that shit with the thing. And I didn't even have a memory of what I had played or hadn't played. You know, it was all...
You were just looking to get out the door.
Just get out the door, you know, sweat it out. So, and I've been sick since then a couple of times where you feel like you're about to throw up, or on a session you feel like you're about to throw up for whatever reason, you know, and just keep playing, keep concentrating on the music, and it's invariably, that's the take that they like, that's the performance that they like, and I swear to God, my belief, my theory is, you know, that you're playing from instinct, and there's nothing stopping the connection from your heart to your hands. You know, there's no contingencies. You know, you're not making any preparations for anything else. Well, I might play this, or I could play that, or I might go here, or...
yeah, it's purely on instinct.
Yeah.
What would you say to cats today? What do you say to them about the sustainability of being a musician in 2018?
I think the most important thing is to have the desire to do it. You know, if you don't have the desire to do it, you're not going to be able to... Sorry.
People are looking, man. Yeah.
If you don't have the desire to do it, well, let's put it this way.
Is it a calling, though? Is it desire? What does that feel like and look like?
It feels like you wake up in the morning and pray to God you can do what you did, what you want to do, what you're on the planet to do, you know, and that's the desire. If you don't have that much desire to do it, I would recommend not doing it, because you're not going to be able to, you mentioned sustain, you know. I wouldn't have been doing it this long, except that I have this desire to play music, and I enjoy so much playing with people, and I'm so challenged by playing with the great musicians that I play with, and that's driving everything. The desire to play music with other people, desire to create music is driving everything else. You know, everything else comes along with that. But the desire to do it is the first and foremost thing. You know, and then you got to have the willingness to practice and put all this time into it, and not expect rewards for doing it.
Did you play for free a lot?
Sure.
Because we're in an age now where it's more like, I mean, you're not getting the. Can't remember the Brecker was telling me about the service that would call you. Maybe you
radio registry.
Yeah, that's right. You don't have that ring. The phone's not. I mean, that allowed you to play the music you wanted to play at 7th Avenue South because you had money in your pocket.
Yeah.
But that sort of infrastructure is gone now. So.
Well, there are still people making jingles.
There's still a jingle operation here?
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful to hear.
I don't know who does it.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It's very anonymous now. You know, it's like
actually, I do know Leo Sidran, Ben Sidran.
Oh, he checked in on this video before. He said hello.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Leo's doing jingles?
He, at the end of his yearly report, he plays a couple of things, a Chrysler Mark IV jingle or something like that. I think he's had a couple of projects, you know, and he says right in his video, you know, this helps pay the rent and pay for the latest operating system, and And that's always the way it was with Will and I and Grolnick and Rob Mounsey and Jeff Mironoff, guys in another band of mine, Joe Cool. You know, we played a lot of jingles during the day and got to do a record project at night, and then maybe a live gig after that, you know. But it was great to have that cushion. The singers, you know, did great. They were making 10 times as much as the musicians made.
Well, that's an interesting point too.
Yeah.
Just for my own selfish needs, could you just finish by playing a solo for Don Grolnick? I listened to some of the stuff he wrote. He died way too early, but an ode to Don before we wrap up here.
Okay.
Sounds like fusion to me. Chris Parker, much love, man. Thanks for being part of the program,
Hey,
man.
it's great, Jake. Thanks so much.
See you all in a little bit.